In this video we're going to go over how to modify the default offsets to the annotation for plane, profile, and cross-section for drainage when you're using like element annotation or model annotation for cross-sections. And so as I mentioned in previous videos, when you're using element annotation on these drainage features, it's figuring out and knowing what to annotate based off of the feature definition. Alright, so when you first use element annotation, and as long as you're not doing the override, what it's going to do is it's going to go back to the file that element is contained in. Right, so this element is contained in the BD file, this feature. And it's going to go get the annotation settings from there. So I'm going to jump over to that file real quick. So I'm over in that file that contains those drainage features. And what we're going to do is we're going to go over into our Explorer, over and open our standards. And we are going to dive into your active file, annotation groups. And we'll start off with the plan. And so you can see there's a linear and then there's a linear 3D. Right? So the linear 3D is what's doing the flow arrows, and then inside this linear, these two is what's doing the actual pipe size and type. So if I take a quick jump back over to my container file, the file that contains my sheets, and if I look in there, you're going to see nothing's really populated. So one thing to note about Explorer is it doesn't like to populate if you're not in the design model. So let me jump over there real quick, and then I can refresh this. And so what you'll notice is that nothing has been copied into the file. Now there's drawing because we did the drawing model annotation, but you notice that the plan, linear, and linear 3D are not there. I'll show kind of how you can get that in there later, but for this reason, this kind of is another indicator that it is going back to the file that contains the features, because they are copied into the file here. It means they've been in use, and that's just a part of when you use that feature definition. Right. So if we can right click on this proposed one, and we can hit manage, and you can see that there is one annotation set up. And we take a look at the location, you'll see it's saying where to kind of annotate. So in horizontal components, in the middle, what should annotate? Should annotate text? Do you want a leader, a placement? And that's really what we want. Now if we get on the text, that's what's saying, hey, here, use this text favorite. But if you want to change the offset, it's really just in this placement section. So right now it's set to 0.15, right? So I'll move it up something drastic so you can definitely see the difference, right? So maybe I'll move it up to 0.5, right? So that's for proposed. Now you'd probably want to do the same thing for the flow arrow, right? If you're going to move the text down, you probably also want to move the flow arrow down. So it's very similar, and this time it's saying annotate a cell. What cell do you want to annotate? It's this flow arrow cell. Alright, so let's take a look at the placement, and this offset right here is what we're going to be changing. So maybe I'll just bump that up a little bit to 2. Right, you might have to play around with it a little bit. So there, I've updated those. So what I want to do is I want to jump back to my file that contains my sheets. I'm just going to reopen it. And so what you notice is right on reopen, it auto adjusted these. So it definitely adjusted these offsets to the new values. As you can see, all of them that were replaced with annotation. Yep. Now what I want to show you now is, let me delete that one out and let me just go back to drawing production, do element annotation. And this time what I'm going to do is, instead of taking the default, I'm going to hit check on override. And when I check on override, I'm going to go ahead and pick my linear proposed plan. So it's the same annotation group, but I'm checking on override now. And I want you to see what happens. So I'll accept those. I'm going to click this, and I'll reset to complete. Now one thing you'll notice is there's no flow arrow. So there's no way to override the flow arrow. It's because it's in the 3D side of things, so you have to use element annotation and take the default and not override. But now that I did that, what I want to show is, I'm going to go back to my design model and go back over into my standards in this file. And if you remember earlier, when I looked at annotation groups, this was not here, right? So now that I override it, it copied it in. And if I manage it, and I come over to this placement tab, I see it's at 0.5, so it copied from the feature definition over. So maybe I go 0.3 here. Alright, I'm going to go back to my and you'll notice that it automatically updated just this one and not the other one. So these ones, since I did not place it with the override, right? So this override annotation group, since I had it checked off when I placed these ones, it's going back to the source inside the file that feature is in. But once I override, then it'll use what's in your file, in your active file, right? So there's just a thing to note of how it's working. So profile is literally exactly the same, except instead of going into the playing annotation group, you can go into the profile. Alright, so nothing's copied into this file yet, which is as expected because we haven't override any of those annotation groups. Alright, so I can go back to my drainage base map, and if I look in the profile section under linear, you'll see there's the drainage pipe annotation. So if I hit manage, you'll see it's pretty much the same. This time it's in vertical components, and we're in profile view. So I go into my placement, and you'll see it's set to 0.2. So again, you can offset that. Maybe I go to 0.3. And now there's no flow arrow, so there's really just one annotation group for profiles. Alright, so if I jump back over to my GP file, we go over to profile group. I should have had it up before so you could see the change here, but now that I have it up, let me just go ahead and reload it, just to make sure it's got the update from the source. Yep. So same thing here. If I wanted to override it, it will copy it into the file. So I'm going to do an override, and this time I'm going to go and choose in the profile our proposed drainage pipe detailed. I'll go and click this one. So we're annotated now, so now we should be able to see in here, which again is a little quirk about needing to be in the design model to get these loaded. So now I'll refresh now that I'm in design model. Sometimes you have to click on it and hit refresh there. Alright, so now that I got it loaded in design model, we can go back to profile and let's go take a look at, we can watch this change. Alright, so again it's grayed out, so I guess you have to stay in the design model. Then you can manage it. They really don't like you editing apparently if you're not in the design model. So let's make this placement drastic, right? Let's go like 0.6. Alright, we should now be able to go back to the profile, and you can see it jumped way down. This one stayed the same, right? Again, same thing as plain view. If you're using the non-overrides, going back to the source file to get the settings for the annotation. If you override, just gonna then use the settings in the file. Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about or show you is the cross-section annotation, which is handled slightly differently. Alright, so inside cross-section, if you remember from the previous videos, there's no like per feature setting. It's all controlled at the drawing model annotation level, right? So when we were in that video going over cross-section annotation, we couldn't use element annotation and cross sections, we had to use drawing model annotation, right? And if you're in this case, there's no going back to the source file, right? Because you're not looking at the specific feature. You're saying, hey, annotate with this drawing model annotation. So at that point, it copies it into the file. So here it is. There's the drainage sanitary detailed. So again, I got to get to the design model just to view this. Right. So if we manage this, what we can see if we take a look at the location, well, first we can see there's several different annotations. So if I take a look at drainage proposed and I take a look at what it's going to annotate, you can see it's looking for all these different feature definitions. So I'm saying, hey, if you see any of these feature definitions in the cross section, then I want you to use this annotation. So, what to annotate? It's going to annotate text. If I go look at the text, it says, here's a text favorite to annotate. And then again, just like the other ones, the placement is where you control it. So in here, I have a vertical offset of 0.05. So for cross sections, if you wanted to change that, this is how you would do that. Right? So if I just change it to like 5 instead of 0.5, and maybe I go to one of my cross sections. So I think I did this one right here, right? So if I come up here and I'll just remove this annotation, go ahead and add it back. Alright, so we'll just do the drainage one, so it won't get the grid. So it didn't really change much offset. Let's just make it very drastic so we can see this. Alright, so again, I gotta go back to my design model. Manage, let's go to that, make sure I'm on the right one. You know what, I have drainage full and drainage CL full, so remember I added those new feature definitions for CL. I think I had this feature definition used, that's probably why we didn't see it. So let's go make sure we change the right one. So these ones are using the feature definitions with the centerline display, or these ones are just the ones without the CL, meaning they're going to show the extents in plain view. Alright, so now that I've changed the right one, let's go back over to that. And let's do a re-annotation here. So let me remove all of the annotation groups. And we'll add back in this drainage. And now you can see that huge difference, right? So this video is really just to show you how you can control that offset. So if you don't like that default offset, this video will show you how to control changing that in plain view versus profile view versus cross section. So hopefully it's helpful.